Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Build Computers. Today I've got the Corsair iCUE H100i Elite Capellix water cooler in their series of water coolers with increasingly longer names as they keep adding more things on. I'm surprised it doesn't have RGB on the end of it. However, Capellix is the name of their latest LED RGB technology. Not sure if there's actually anything new about it or if it's just marketing guff, but whatever. It's a new design. Now, I've fitted a lot of the Corsair Hydro series water coolers. I'm actually a big fan of these, but I haven't fitted one of these newer ones yet. So I thought we'd do an actual video about this one so we can see what has changed and how these things are evolving. So let's open this guy up and have a look. This particular one was extremely attractive to me in the price. So before we go as I just start taking some bits out of the box here, the price of this, I paid £130 for this, or actually rather my client paid £130 for this. And there are cheaper water coolers available on the market. This is a 240mm radiator, so 240mm class. And to put things in perspective, like the god tier performance water cooler is widely regarded to be the Arctic Liquid Freezer 2, and the 240mm version of that is like 80 or 90 pounds, around that kind of area, which is astonishingly good bang for buck. However, the problem with the liquid freezer is there's two camps. There's people who want industrial performance, and there's people who want something that looks quite attractive as well. I primarily fall in the latter, but I understand the former. However, if you want good aesthetics, in my opinion, the Liquid Freezer 2 is hideous. There, I said it. It's an unpopular opinion. You know, fight me in the comments. Anyway, I think the Corsair water coolers give a really good balance of aesthetics and performance. And at £130, they are more expensive, but they're still reasonably priced. We're not talking the cost of the NZXT Kraken Z series here, where they're sky high, like 180 quid or something like that. And they're fantastic as well, but man, that price is tough to swallow. So this one was £130, and what really caught my attention is not only is it £130 with RGB fans, but it also comes with a Corsair lighting node core. Now this guy is particularly interesting because it's one of Corsair's better RGB hubs, and I'll show you in the video how this thing all hooks up, because that means that this is a really good launching off point for an iCUE lighting setup in your computer. This is a kit that you can really add on to, and that makes a difference from the older kits where you would have to plug, you know, the actual water cooler would have a couple of fan headers and maybe even a couple of RGB headers, but it would only have the headers for what comes with the kit. Whereas this, with the lighting node core here, means that you've got expansion. This is a 6-channel hub, so it's got 6 fan outputs and 6 RGB outputs. So you can plug your 2 fans that come with this into it, and then you can later on add in a 3rd fan for the front if you're running triple intake, and you could have like 2 fans at the top and 1 at the back and have 6 RGB fans all plugged into this hub without having to buy any additional controllers or anything like that, which makes this a really good starting point for an iCUE build. So let's get this all out and we'll have a look at it, and we're going to fit it into a computer and just see what it's like to fit one of these. So the unit itself, the radiator it's pretty simple looking these days. Corsair haven't put any sort of bits of trim or anything like that. We've just got the Corsair logo on the side, so that is fine. That's a nice clean look. It's got nice big tanks on it, and the hoses have got a nice amount of flex. There's not an enormous amount of length on these, so if you're front mounting and you're going for the die-hard hoses down approach, that's going to be a struggle. That's going to be a struggle. However, take it from me, hoses up is fine. Just to put this to rest now, let's say your computer is here, here's the front, and the meta is to be like that, hoses down. However, this is also fine. This is also fine. What isn't okay is this, where you have the radiator at the bottom of the case and the pump head up on your CPU, because that puts the pump head at the highest point in the system, which means any loose air bubbles in the system, which may exist from the get-go, there will always be a little bit of air in there, and over time, where the system will lose some liquid to permeation, etc., you will get air in there, and that air will collect in the pump head, and that can cause you problems. So that is the big no-no. However, again, radiator at the front, hoses up like this. This is still fine because the top of the radiator is still the highest point in the system, and the air is going to collect at the highest point. So this is completely fine. Anyway, let's move on. So the actual unit has got the revised pump design, and all of this lights up. And also in the packet, we've got a second faceplate, and you can swap these out as you see fit. So we've got the black one, you can also fit a white one there as well. So with the black one, the light colored areas you can see will light up, and with the white one, the white colored areas will light up with the black lines. So you can go for a high contrast, or you've got this high contrast look where you can have lines of color, or you can have lots of color with lines of black. And depending on the rest of your setup, depends on which one you might like the look of. This one is going to give you more light and more visible color. However, this one gives you that sort of dark look, clean. So it depends on what else is in your computer as to which will look better. It's completely personal preference. So that's just 4 bolts there, 4 Allen bolts, and you can swap those covers out for whichever one you please. We've got a new cable set up here as well. So we've got this, this wiring harness comes out, and there's no ugly USB connector on the side of this anymore. One of my biggest beefs with a lot of AIOs, particularly the NZXT Kraken X series and the Corsair Hydro series, is the USB connection is a USB mini B or micro B connector on the side, and you have this nerdy little 90-degree USB cable coming out, which always looks terrible, which is why most of the time whenever I fit them in all of the nice sweeping panning shots I do of the finished thing, I don't have that cable in there and I connect it up afterwards because it looks gross. So we've got this cable coming out now, and that's going to go back to, does that go back to the hub? It does. So that goes back to the hub. And then this little noodly guy, that's just a little tacho signal that goes back to your motherboard CPU fan header, just to tell your motherboard that there is actually a CPU cooler attached. So the hub itself, if we break this open, I don't know if this is a standard one or not, because the problem with Corsair is they make too many damn different hubs. They don't have a lot of consistency with this, but whatever. Anyway, so this is labeled as nothing on the back. On the website, they said this was a lighting node core, I believe, or a commander core. I don't know. Anyway, as you can see, we've got 6 RGB channels and we've got 6 fan channels. So those are 4-pin fan channels. On the side, that is where our water cooler connects up, and we've also got a temperature input sensor there. Then the fans we've got, these are the ML series fans. So these are the maglev fans. I don't know the actual name. I think they're ML120s. But yeah, decent fans, and I believe these are 8 RGB LEDs in the hub. And again, with the diffusion now, we should get really nice diffused color on these. And that makes a big difference to how it all looks when it's running. Obviously, these are also 4-pin fans, so you get really good PWM performance and silence. The other bags we've got is a selection of different mounting kits. We've got TR4 for your thread rippers, we've got AM4, and there's an Intel mounting kit there as well. So if you're running AM4, these do use the 2-point clips, which I'm not a fan of. I really believe that they should develop a 4-bolt mount for AM4. It's really not difficult to do. It really wouldn't require a massive redesign of the actual unit itself. And everyone I know really hates 2-point hold down. It works, but just 4 bolts is so much better, and it's what they used to use in the older ones. I don't know why they changed it, but yeah, whatever. We've got a big bag of screws as well, so that's a thing. And finally, Just a nice little touch there. They've actually supplied a nice little Allen key for swapping out that front faceplate, so that's a nice touch. Right, with all that in mind now, we're going to fit this into a PC and we'll see how the fitting looks and we'll see what it looks like all built up. So the computer we're going to be fitting this to today is a Phanteks P400A build. This has got a Ryzen 5 600X in it and an MSI RTX 3070. It's a really nice clean build and the owner is building up an RGB setup, so this is going to tie in really nicely with that. However, as you can see, it's let down by that tiny little Wraith stealth cooler on the CPU, which is absolutely going to be wounding their Precision Boost Overdrive clocks. So before we get started, we'll just run this up as it is and just see what the temperatures and clock speeds are like in Cinebench R23. And then we'll get the cooler fitted to it and do an after comparison just so you can see what kind of differences we get. I mean, it goes without mention that the water cooler is going to destroy a Wraith Stealth. However, this kind of just shows you what kind of differences you can get and the importance of having something more than a stock blower in your system. So I'm running Cinebench R23 on this thing now, and in the shop, we're not getting temperatures that were quite as bad as the customer was reporting to me. In their bedroom, where things were hotter, they were getting sort of 80 degrees, and they sent me screenshots about that. However, even still, sitting in Cinebench R23, we're sitting at sort of 74. We're seeing spikes of 75 degrees, and our CPU clocks are sitting at about, 1425 is fairly consistent. And that has sagged down a bit. It was looking for 4150, that kind of thing, whereas now we're really struggling to stay over 4100. So that's the benchmark that we're looking to be. I'm not sure how much we're going to improve on that, but let's see what we can do with it. Right, so let's open this up. So this being a Phanteks P400A, one of the shortcomings of this case is that you can't top mount radiators in it. Although it has two 120mm fan mounts up the top, they're not offset, which means there's no room for a radiator up there. So we're going to front mount on this. So I shall take off the front glass, we'll take off the front panel as well. And we'll zap out the CPU cooler and that front Phanteks fan. The hell is holding that on? Oop. Remember kids, twist, don't pull. Right, get rid of you. This case airflow fan that came with the chassis, we can repurpose this somewhere else now. So a good place to put it would be up at the top of the case to function as a second exhaust fan. That's probably where we're going to move this one to. So to fit this to our AM4 system, we first need to put the AM4 retention brackets back on. So I'll just add those in and screw in the bolts. And now I'm just going to offer up the water cooler for roughly where I want it to go and just check for alignment and fitment. So we're going to have our radiator up at the front and we're going to have our pump head about there. And then our hoses are just going to do a nice little loop there. And if we want to do hoses down, that is actually possible. The hoses are just long enough to fit this case and go hoses down. However, I mentioned at the start of the case, and I'll say it again, and I'll die on this hill, hoses up front mount is fine. It's absolutely fine. If you disagree with me, you can mount your radiator however you like. However, hoses up, a-okay. Once again, take note, the top of the radiator and the hoses are higher up than the pump is. That's what matters. Next, we're going to remove the Intel clips from this, which just pull off like so. Oh, those are very easy to remove. These used to be a lot stiffer. And we'll just plug in the AMD ones, which go in with a nice satisfying clunk. Done and done. And now I'm just going to preemptively take the hooks and put the thumb screw on just by like one turn, or one or two turns, just so it's holding in place. It's a lot easier to put these on now rather than when you're trying to hold it on the CPU. So we'll just mount those up and be careful not to stick my thumb in the pre-applied thermal paste. There we go. And over we go. Now I've just got to hook those two little hooks over the pegs. And as soon as you put a couple of turns in one side, it will just hold in place while you screw it up on tightly. It's very difficult to show you guys what I'm doing while I do this at the same time. There we go. And you'll find that these hooks do bend down slightly. That's completely normal. That spring tension is just providing tension to hold the pump head down against the CPU. And I'm just going to turn those down until they stop turning. There we go, that'll do. We don't need to graunch them up tightly, literally just to the end of the travel. That's fine with me. And I'll just give it a bit of a wiggle. That's on just fine. Good stuff. Right, now that's secure, we'll get the radiator mounted up. So for our front mount radiator here, we're going to go with fans on the front. So that means the RGB fans will be visible through the front mesh grille of this case. If you've got a solid metal front panel just with vents on the side instead, I would instead put the fans behind the radiator, so then you can see the lighting on the back of the radiator instead. Or if you want to go mad lad, you could buy another two fans and do push-pull configuration. Although personally, I don't think that's worthwhile unless you're a mad lad, but whatever. So in any case, we're going through here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use these super long screws that come with the kit, and we're going to go screw and washer through the front, all the way through the fans and all the way into the radiator. So I'll just get 2 screws per fan fitted first, just so I can locate it all in place. This is the hard bit, is just getting it mounted up. Once you've got a couple of screws just to locate it and hold everything in place, then we can put in the rest of the screws for proper fitment. So that's one corner, and I'll get the other corner of the same fan. Right, and while that's all loose, I can now just move this around a little bit, and we can just make sure that's sitting nicely. And we can pick where it will look most aesthetically pleasing. So, my opinion, I'm just going to settle that just so it occupies the 2 top fan slots of the case nicely. And there is room for a triple intake on this case, but we're going to leave the bottom one empty because putting anything other than another one of these ML RGB fans there will look weird, and we don't have another one of those fans, so we'll leave it empty. So now I'll just tighten up those 4 screws, and then I can put the rest of them in just for posterity. So just for clarity as well, the direction of the airflow is that direction. So we're intaking through the front and we're blowing into the case. If you were going for a top mount radiator, you'd obviously have the fans the other way round, where they're pulling air through the radiator and blowing it out the top. There is a big argument to have over front mount versus top mount. With a front mount radiator, the heat of the CPU is going into the case, and your graphics card will get some of that heat. However, by the same token, if you top mount your radiator, then the heat of your graphics card is going into the radiator for the CPU to have to take. It's an unwinnable situation, and it swings and roundabouts. In my opinion, I don't think it makes any meaningful difference. If you're going for a particular setup, like if you're overclocking the nuts off of your graphics card and you need all the help it can get, then obviously you might want to sort of top mount for that. And likewise, you know, if your CPU needs all the cooling it can get, then front mount would be more beneficial, so it's getting a cold air intake. So I've now threaded through the wires from the pump head through to the back of the case, and I've got the speed sensor wire plugged into this CPU fan header. So remember, if your motherboard has a pump fan header like this motherboard does, you don't want to plug it into that. You want it on the CPU fan header because it's supposed to be sending a signal to the motherboard to alert it that there is a cooler attached. This cable isn't actually powering or driving anything. It's just a cooler presence signal. That's it. Right, now we need to do some plumbing around the back of the case. So now comes in the RGB hub. So we've got this guy to put somewhere. Now, of course, the nice thing is, so this guy has SATA power and a USB 2 internal header that we've got to hook up somewhere. Now, I was expecting the pump head to require SATA power as well, but the nice thing about this setup is actually it doesn't. The pump head plugs into here, as we previously discussed, and then it gets all of its power from the hub, it would seem. And that's really nice because I was fully expecting this whole setup to require 2 SATA power connectors, which would be horrifying, but this is Corsair we're talking about. It wouldn't surprise me. So we're going to mount this guy. I'm going to put him over here. This isn't really a very flat surface, but we've got open space over here where it's not in the way of anything else. Other options, it would be cool if they designed this to fit in a 2.5-inch base, so you could put it down here. But I can't put it in here without the ports on it being blocked. Another option would be we could take out this plate and we could take out those screws, and that would give us a reasonably flat surface to mount it on. So that's another option. However, in this instance, we've got open space over here, and when it comes to mounting up RGB hubs like this, we're going to be sticking it on with a couple of double-sided pads which come with the kit. So it doesn't really matter where we put it, just anywhere where there's space. So I'm just going to delicately put it in place, and it can always be moved later on. So we'll get this guy mounted up. Right, that's all our wiring around the back done now. So as you can see, we've got that mounted up in a nice clear space. I had to offset it slightly because we've got screws coming through for the little doorways you have in Phanteks cases here. But it's sitting there nicely. The double-sided pads are holding it in rock solid. That's not going anywhere. However, hypothetically, you could get it off and remove it and put it somewhere else if you wanted to. So we've put in on the first and second fan channels and RGB channels. There's a chance that I've got the fans the wrong way round, but we can easily check that in software in a moment. And if I've got them the wrong way round, it's easy enough just to disconnect the wires and swap them over. So don't panic about getting them right. If you've got it wrong, you just take the cover off and move the cables around until they're correct. And we've also got the SATA power connector hooked up down the bottom and the USB cable going to the motherboard. So with all of these extra channels we've got here as well, it's going to be really easy to plug in either extra fans or additionally, I believe we can also hook up Corsair RGB strips to this later on as well, which will be a great addition to this particular case to get some wash lighting inside. But for now, we're just going to close it up. So as you can see at the default settings, we've got that lovely chromatic look on the front. That's a very nice effect. And looks like we're running stop-start fans by default as well. Obviously, all of these fan curves will be configurable from within iCUE. So anything that you see that you're not keen on, don't worry, you can change that. And the pump head itself, that is very bright. That's very, very pretty indeed. So now we've got Cinebench R23 running again, just like we had before. And we've only been running for a couple of minutes, so you've got to give everything time to warm up. But keep in mind that the idea of a water cooler is that it takes like 20 minutes to warm up, kind of thing. The idea is that water coolers never truly reach equilibrium under daily loads. You have to be benchmarking for like half an hour solid to actually get them up to temperature. However, with that in mind, we're sitting at about 57 degrees. Even once it's warmed up, it might be looking for 60 degrees, you know, maybe 61, but we've slashed an easy 15 degrees out of the temperature right now. No problems whatsoever. And the result of that temperature drop is that we're now seeing boost clocks of nearly 150 megahertz higher. And on top of that, consider the fact that we're in Cinebench R23, which is an AVX all-core workload. So this is where you'll be seeing effectively your lowest core clocks. If we're getting 150 megahertz extra on just an all-core load here, we could be seeing significantly higher boosts on the single-core boost. Now, unfortunately, I forgot to check for a single-core boost before we started on this, but this is a proof of concept to show you that by upgrading the cooling on your computer, you can be getting a lot of extra performance that the stock blower is not going to be giving you. Now, it's easy to look at this and go, yes, well, water cooler beat the Wraith Stealth. It was never a competition. However, sometimes it's good just to see this stark comparison and why you want to have that extra cooling on your computer. You can see here how it will make all the difference. So past that, now we're just going to have a quick nosy into iCUE, and I'll just show you what kind of effects we can do with the RGB. This won't be an exhaustive look because iCUE is a big app with lots and lots of things that you can do. But what I want to demonstrate here is just the principal effects that you can do with it. So from the homepage of iCUE here, you can see we've got a H100i Elite Capellix connected, and we've also got some Vengeance RGB Pro that's in this computer. When this particular machine is at home on the desk, there is also a Corsair mouse, keyboard, and mouse mat, and some other accessories connected up to it. And you actually get a whole suite of all the Corsair stuff in iCUE. And that's what makes an iCUE setup really, really nice to have, because when you've got Corsair everything, you get that whole ecosystem. And it's really nice when you have the full setup. A lot of people, some people say they really detest iCUE. Personally, I've heard people say terrible things about all of the RGB software. So your mileage may vary, but personally, I like iCUE a lot. Because what we can do now is if I click on the H100i here, if we go into lighting setup, the fans at the front are now showing one red LED and one yellow LED, so we can identify which fan is number 1 and which is number 2, so we can check that we've got them hooked up properly. This is incredibly handy for identification when you're doing any kind of effect that relies on the fan being a certain way around. And now if I go into lighting effects, you can now see the actual LED layout on each device, so we can start building up the effects on it. So it's defaulted to spiral rainbow at the moment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this out of lighting link and spiral rainbow, and I'm just going to try and add an effect. So if we click on plus, we can select from any of the effects on the list here, and I'm not going to go through them all because it'll take a while, but just to give an example, I'll show you a particular effect that I really like doing on iCUE setups, and it's actually the same effect that I have on one of my Corsair setups. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply a static color, and I'm going to set that to, in this case, well, I'll do exactly the same setup I've got on another one. I'm going to set that to purple, and I'm just going to dial down the brightness of that a bit. I'm just going to take that down to 170 red, 170 blue. Whoops, 170 blue. There we go. So we've just got a slightly dull purple. It's still coming up strong on camera, but whatever. And what I can do now is I can add another effect on top of that. And I'm going to add in the infinity. There it is. I really like the infinity effect. And so what we'll do that is I'm going to set it to a solid red. And for alternating, I'll set both of the colors to red so we get just red. And what that now does is, as you can see, we've got an intermittent rotating red band around the ring of the pump head and the actual center LED of the pump head. And if we swing around to the front of the case, The effect's not quite working there, and the reason why that effect isn't working is that these fans are the wrong way round. So let's just fix this. I need to go into lighting setup, and I need to swap these around. So I need to put LED port 1 on the right there. And now if I go back to lighting effects again, there we go. And now you can see we've got that little rotating infinity loop in the fans. And what this gives us is it gives us constant lighting effects, but with just a little bit of animation on it that just brings everything to life. And this is my favorite kind of effects to do with an RGB setup, is it gives you just some base, it gives you solid light, but it allows you to put in just a bit of animation that just, as I say, brings it to life without it making all sort of flashing or strobing lights, because no one wants that because it catches your eye all the time. You want something that just looks aesthetically pleasing when you look at it, but doesn't catch your eye when you're not looking at it. And that's my favorite kind of effect. And obviously you can set this to any color you want. We could also set this to, be white. And once again, for my base color, I'm just going to dial that back to 150, just to dull that down. And now we've got the same effect, but on white. So you can easily stack this up to be anything you like. And if we set that into blue for the animation, you can now have a blue on white effect. And so you can see that now by adjusting just a mixture of two colors, a base color and an accent color, you can start building everything up. So this is the kind of thing you can do in iCUE, and you can layer up these effects as much or as little as you want. And again, we could apply exactly the same kind of effect to the RAM as well and make the RAM do the same thing. And that's what makes iCUE, a full iCUE setup, such a doddle to use, because you can synchronize everything. Obviously the cost is you've got to have Corsair everything. However, if you have it and you can use it, you can create some really sweet effects. And that is the Corsair iCUE H100i Elite Capellix. I had to look down at the name again there because it's too heckin' long. Corsair, make the name shorter. It's really hard to remember. Anyway, it's a really nice evolution. There's been lots of small changes over time since the old ones, and all of them are very welcome changes. They've got this thing really streamlined now, but the big difference that I can see is the addition of coming with that lighting node core really expands what you can do with these. Previous systems were very self-contained. You had everything you need for what came in the box, but it wasn't really great for tying into existing setups. Whereas this is a great launching point for doing a complete iCUE setup. And in this particular build, where we've already got Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro RAM, and there's going to be an LED strip going into this thing as well, now combined with the keyboard, the mouse, the rest of the Corsair ecosystem, it all comes together in iCUE. So past that, thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. As always, support links are down in the description below, or stick around for the end card for my Twitter, my Patreon, and my Discord. Thanks a lot, bye for now.